Hey, everybody. Merry Christmas. It is time for Supernatural Theology. We are going to have a video tonight. It might be a shorter one. I know that hopefully everybody is in the glorious movement of being a few days away from Christmas, and everybody might not have an hour to sit down and get into a video like this, but I did want to get on tonight and share something that I've really been meditating on, that I've been feasting on these last few days. So we are going to talk about supernatural theology. We're going to talk about the most spectacular, the most supernatural theology of all. This is a phenomenal and vast topic, something that we'll spend the rest of our lives marveling over and going deep into and going high with. And so we're going to the heights tonight, talking about something absolutely glorious. So as we get started here, go ahead and let me know in the chat where you're watching from. Please share the video. That, again, is very helpful. There's been various ways where some of our reach has been limited, and sharing actually helps to kind of bypass some of those things. So please share the video, like, comment, all of those things. All right, so let's get into it. The most spectacular and supernatural theology of all. You know, every culture has somewhat of a supernatural theology. They have some sort of a foundation, although often theologies in many cultures are rooted more in mythology than they are in fact. And so you have things like, of course, the Greek culture, the Roman culture. They have kind of a pantheon of gods, and they have a very defined mythology where, you know, there's things like the god Zeus, and I say God with a little g. You know, this is mythology, although many of these things are rooted in some things that actually happen in history, which we'll touch on a little bit. But supposedly Zeus, you know, was the king of the gods, and he came down on Mount Olympus, and their mythology actually reports some of these gods, some of these divine beings who actually took human wives and had offspring with these human wives. And so what they would describe, or how they would describe these offspring, is they would call them demigods, you know, those who were sort of part God and part human. And so you have a whole history of those like Achilles and Hercules, who were supposedly kind of a mix of the divine and the human. And there's a lot of stories connected to this that, you know, the vast majority of them are fiction, and they teach moral stories and things like that. But it is likely that some of these mythologies are recording something that really happened in history, although their version of it has been perverted. So we know from places like Genesis chapter 6 and the book of Enoch that there was a time in history where angels left their proper estate, to use the language of the New Testament, and they did see the daughters of men and thought that they were beautiful, and they took them as wives, and they had offspring, and these offspring were a mix of the angelic and human, and the Bible calls them Nephilim, and they say that these offspring were the mighty men of renown, or the great men of old, that have been kind of immortalized in the stories of history. And so you've got a hint in Genesis chapter 6 that some of these mythologies that talk about fallen divine beings taking human wives and then having offspring, that there's some seed of truth in those, but the Bible paints this as a very negative thing, you know, that men were corrupted because of this, and it's just a few paragraphs later that God repented that he ever made man, because every thought and intent of the heart of man was only evil continually. And God says, I'm going to wipe out the whole human race with a flood, and I'm going to judge the earth because of this evil that's come upon the earth. And that's where we get the story of Noah's flood. And again, many cultures record the flood as a major moment in their history. And there's different reasons for the flood, but often in some of the non-biblical sources, those that have been corrupted yet hold on to something true, they will say that it was because of the sin or the wickedness of the gods or the demigods that this flood came upon the earth. We know actually that it was a judgment from God to wipe out the corrupted genealogy, and that's why it says that Noah was pure in his generations or his genealogy, and God took Noah and his 7 family members and made a new beginning of the human race. This is one reason that 8 is the number of new beginnings, because the 8 people on Noah's Ark made a new beginning of the human race. There's other reasons that 8 is the number of new beginnings as well. But this is pretty remarkable that an event happened that somehow the divine and human were mixed together, and it wasn't a small event. It was such a powerfully significant event that it's affected the supernatural history or the mythology of pretty much every culture on the face of the earth that has a written record or a written history. And we know that the reality is that it changed things dramatically in the biblical narrative as well. We know that this is not the only time that the seed of the divine was mixed with humanity. We know that there was a much greater and purer manifestation of this event that we're going to talk about in just a little bit. So we're talking about supernatural history, things that happened in the past that have dramatic consequence in history and for our future as well. We know that something far more supernatural than Genesis chapter 6 or than Greek mythology or Roman mythology, something way more significant and far more spectacular and supernatural actually happened in the past. And that was that one day around 2,000 years ago, there was a baby who was born in a manger in Bethlehem who was actually the God-man. He fully embodied the nature and the character of God the Father, yet he took on the frame of fallen humanity. He took on the likeness of sinful flesh, is what Philippians tells us. Not that Jesus was sinful, but he took on the physical body of fallen humanity whenever he came to the earth. And, we live in a time right now where there is a lot happening that is really intense. We're living in a time whenever there are global events that are happening that are shaking everything that can be shaken. Hebrews talks about this, that there's coming a time when God will shake all things so that the things that can be shaken will be removed and that the things that can't be shaken will remain. We know Haggai prophesied about this, that God's going to shake all things that can be shaken. And when he does, the nations will turn to the desire of nations. God's going to use the shaking to turn the nations to himself, to his son. And I was listening to a message by Billy Graham, actually, a few days ago. I was listening to a Christmas message by Billy Graham, I think from like the 1970s. And Billy Graham was talking about, and the reason it struck me is because we're in a time of conflict right now, a time where there's actual war in the West. Of course, Ukraine, Russia, and many Western nations are kind of being pulled into that. But there's also battles on many fronts right now. There's a battle for life that's raging in a more intense way than it has for the past 50 years or so. There's a battle over truth right now that manifests in a lot of ways. The corruption that's being released through academia in our colleges and even through elementary schools and high schools. There's a battle for truth related to the image of God in man. He created us male and female in his image, and there's a battle over gender identity right now. There's a particular insanity. There's a strong delusion that's come over many that's blinded their eyes to the truth. And there's a battle for the truth to recover the glory of God in mankind, both male and female. And so Billy Graham, in this Christmas message, he just for a moment, he talked about a time in the 1700s whenever there was war, there were battles that were happening that had caught the attention of Europe. And he was talking about during the Napoleonic Wars, whenever Napoleon, at kind of the height of his conquest, he had a vision to take over the world. He was probably an antichrist, one who was in the spirit of Antichrist, who had a vision to take over the world. And because of that spirit manifesting powerfully through a man who had military strategy and who had economic strength and who had brought strong military together from different nations, he had a vision to take over Europe and then take over the world. And in the year 1809, there were two very significant battles that really caught the attention of Europe. And as I was hearing Billy Graham talk about this, I was thinking about the battles that have caught the attention of, I think, the church right now for sure. We're aware that the global shaking is not just, coincidence. It's not just chance. These are battles right now for the soul of America and many other nations. They're battles for what is going to happen on the earth for the next number of decades or even centuries. And during 1809, as the battles of Trafalgar and the Battle of Waterloo were taking place, these were very significant battles that books have been written about. And so during this year 1809, whenever much of the West was fretting over what's going to happen. Is Napoleon going to be successful in taking over the world? And what will that mean for the rest of us? There was a great threat because of the battles that were happening. But, behind closed doors and under the surface, what was visible was Napoleon's conquest, but what was happening that was far more significant is that across the face of the earth, there were babies that were being born in 1809, such as Gladstone was born in Liverpool in England in 1809. Alfred Tennyson was born in Lincolnshire in 1809. Oliver Wendell Holmes was born in Massachusetts in 1809. Frederick Chopin was born in Warsaw, Poland the same year. Felix Mendelssohn was born in Hamburg, Germany the same year. Abraham Lincoln was born in Kentucky in 1809. And I'm sure hundreds of thousands of other babies were born during that year, 1809. And so while there is a shaking and a battle that has the attention of the nations, and there's many fretting over what does the future hold and what do these battles mean for us, there were babies that were being born who would have a far greater impact on the near future, who would have a far greater impact even now, 213 years later. The lives of those babies have had a far greater impact on history and even up till the present day than Napoleon's battles in 1809. And so the thing that had the attention of the masses was something that was significant in the moment, but ultimately Napoleon's conquest was about to come to an end. But the lives of these babies were just beginning. And think about the impact of some of these. Think about Abraham Lincoln alone, who was born that year, whose life and whose eventual calling would have a history-shifting impact, not only on America, but would have shockwaves throughout the civilized world. And so those babies who were born that same year, although it wasn't known during a time of great shaking, those babies who were born were actually much more significant than these great battles that were shaking the nations. Now, the most supernatural event in all of history was the birth of a baby. It was the most supernatural thing that has ever happened, that the Godhead, that the God who created the universe with his words somehow laid down his, Philippians says that he laid down his glory. And part of what that means is he laid down his omnipresence. The God who fills the universe right now. He stretches out the heavens like a curtain. He can measure the universe with the span of his hand. All the nations are but a drop in the bucket. He weighs all the mountains in a scale. This is a God who is infinitely powerful and infinitely great, and he is omnipresent everywhere at once. He is omnipotent. With a word, he creates worlds. He is omniscient. He knows not only everything there is to know, from the most insignificant amoeba to, the course of all of the stars and all of the solar systems and all of the planets. I mean, he knows it all, but he laid down his omniscience, his omnipotence, and he somehow joined the fullness of the Godhead into the womb of a virgin named Mary. And 2,000 years ago, a baby was born in a manger in Bethlehem, and that baby's birth would forever change not only that generation, but it would be the hinge of history that would change all of eternity. Not even just all of human history, but eternity shifted whenever God decided to become a man. But not only did he decide to become a man, he decided to become a baby. He came as a helpless baby in a manger who had to be breastfed by his mother, whose diaper had to be changed, who couldn't even speak a word in Hebrew to get the attention of his parents because he laid down certain aspects of his glory, although the fullness of the Godhead dwelt in him bodily. And he was fully human. It was the most supernatural event that's ever happened. And right now, in a time of shaking like we're in, there are things that have our attention, like battles that are going on right now in Congress over marriage, and the battles that are going on that we already mentioned around things like gender and saving lives of unborn babies, and all of these things that, and even less significant things that still can really grab our attention. I can guarantee you that just like the battles of Trafalgar and the battles of Waterloo had everyone's attention in 1809, yet the birth of these babies 213 years later, the battles of Trafalgar and Waterloo have very little impact on our life, yet the birth of all of these great men are still having an impact today. I can guarantee you 213 years from today, we're not going to be thinking at all about the great battles and the shaking that we're experiencing right now. I can absolutely guarantee you 2013 years from now, we're not going to be thinking about any of these battles. It's likely that even 213 years from now, God will have already dealt with all evil and filled the earth with his glory. I can guarantee you that 23 million years from now, we're not going to be thinking about the impact of the shaking and the battles that we're surrounded about right now. But I can absolutely guarantee you, we will be thinking about 213 years from now, 2030 years from now, 23 million years from now, we will be thinking about that birth in a manger, a baby who was born to save the world, the baby whose birth was the hinge of history that absolutely changed everything. Jesus being born to Mary is something that for millions of billions of years we will be worshiping God for. We will be in awe. Our mind will be blown that somehow God himself came and lived a life that we could never live, and he died a death that we deserved, and 3 days later he was raised again, conquering over our enemies, conquering over death itself, dealing forever, not only with our sin, but also with Satan, stripping him of his power and stripping him of his authority. Millions and millions of years from now, we will be rejoicing in that day that we now celebrate in this time of year of Christmas. Now, I know that Jesus probably wasn't born December 25th. As a matter of fact, he almost certainly wasn't, although a case can be made that he was conceived right around this time, and he was probably born during the Feast of Tabernacles or Sukkot. But here's the reality, that during this time of year, you can be walking through Macy's in the mall, hearing some of the greatest worship hymns that have ever been penned, singing the glories of Jesus Christ who came to save us from our sins. O Holy Night, and, O come let us adore him, and hark the herald angels sing. And I mean, all of these glorious hymns being played in the mall as creation is rejoicing over the birth of that baby 2,000 years ago. I actually love Christmas. I love this time of year. It doesn't even bother me that much, all of the commercialism, and it doesn't even bother me that there are some parallels between ancient pagan holidays and Christmas. As a matter of fact, I want to encourage you, Daniel Kalinda did a fantastic video a few days ago. You can find it on YouTube. Search Daniel Kalinda Christmas and you'll find it. And he addresses for, I think, like an hour and a half or 2 hours, all of the controversy over Christmas. Should Christians celebrate Christmas? And he really tears down a lot of the, vitriolic hate that is just thrown at Christmas this time of year, and all of the conspiracy and all that. It'll challenge you. I encourage you to go watch Daniel Kalinda's talk about Christmas that he gave on social media a couple years ago. It was really fantastic. I love this time of year because here's the deal. People talk about Christmas spirit. There does seem to be something special about this time of year. There is a certain kind of, many people are happier this time of year. And I know that a lot of it has to do with, it's likely that you'll be around friends or family, and you'll probably eat good food, and maybe you'll have a few days off of work, and there's gifts being given. There are some things about this time of year that make it special in the natural, but far greater than that. For over 1,700 years, the church, this goes all the way back to around the 3rd or 4th century, that December 25th has been celebrated as Christmas, even though, again, it very likely isn't Jesus' actual birthday. The church has been celebrating the birth of Christ this time of year for 1,700 years or so. Even the Eastern Orthodox Church, they celebrate, like in a week after our Christmas, they celebrate their Christmas. And all of creation is rejoicing over the birth of the Son of God, the one who was born to save us from our sins, the one who's going to come again and fill the earth with his glory. I took some time this morning with my kids and we read through Isaiah 9 and Isaiah 11. And I want to encourage you this time of year, these next few days, dig into Luke chapter 1 and 2, Matthew chapter 1, Isaiah 9, Isaiah 11, some of these great birth of Jesus passages. My kids were asking me 100 questions as we were going through those passages. This is the time of year that, whether it was the right choice or the wrong choice, this is the time that corporately we are reflecting on the birth of Jesus and the power of the revelation that's available. If we would get a hold of the hope, the reason that people talk about the Christmas spirit, there is a hope that is innate during this time that's flowing through the hearts of people, not because of Christmas trees and gifts, but because there is something in the air where creation is rejoicing over the birth of the Son of God. It does not get more supernatural than this. It doesn't get more spectacular than this. This is a special time of year, and I want to encourage you to really meditate on the birth of Jesus. Have your mind blown at the incarnation these next few days. The incarnation, that God became man. This is a big deal. Jesus is the Pantocrator. That means that he is the King of all creation. He is the Lord of the universe. And he could have come any way that he wanted. He could have come on a flaming chariot that was as big as a football stadium. He could have come 100 feet tall and just dealt with his enemies 2,000 years ago. But he chose to come in the most humble way possible as a helpless baby, fully dependent. The God who is utterly independent. He doesn't need anything. He doesn't need anyone to exist. He doesn't need anyone's permission. He does as he wills, and everything he does is right. Everything he chooses is the very best choice. He's the judge of all the earth who does justice. Everything he does is right. And he is independent. He can do whatever he wants because everything he wants is good. And the fully independent God came as a dependent baby in a manger, the most humble place he could ever come, a filthy place where animals, ate and drank and also used the bathroom. He came in that kind of humility to show us something about himself. The lows that he was willing to sink to in order to redeem us and bring us to heights that eye has not seen and ear has not heard, nor has it entered into the heart of man. God is showing us something about himself in the way that he chose to come in the incarnation. And this is the time of year that we are corporately meditating on that amazing birth 2,000 years ago. And so I want to encourage you, dig deep into these passages of Scripture. Let God light your heart on fire. Let him blow your mind. Don't pass over this. It's great to sing along with the Christmas carols. Some of them are awesome, the great hymns that have been written. But go after God for revelation of the power of what happened these days. We need a revelation of the resurrection because that is when Jesus conquered over our enemies. That shows us something about his heart for mankind, and it shows us something about his power and his planned future for the human race. But we also need revelation about the incarnation. He came this way for a reason, and it reveals something to us about his nature. And so let's get revelation about the incarnation during this time. Amen. Thank you so much for joining me. Again, please share the video. Please comment. If you have questions, of course, leave them in the chat. Let me know where you're watching from. Like, share, all of those things. Sharing actually has kind of an exponential impact on how many people see this. But most of all, I want to say Merry Christmas to you, to your family and your friends and everybody you're going to be together with. Rejoice in the Lord. Let your heart be filled with hope. All of the battles that can catch our attention during this time pale in comparison. They are less than a speck of dust, less than nothing compared to the significance of that birth and everything that it means for you and for me and for our future 213 years from now, 2,030 years from now, 23 million years from now. We'll never get over it. And so let's let God blow our mind with a revelation of the significance of that great day. So Merry Christmas, bless you, and Lord willing, I'll see you next Wednesday a little after 5. Thanks.